a missionary, I have come across so many humans, their heresy born of ignorance and stubbornness, and I guide them all to gods of many, even those I myself despise, because a human who believes in evil gods is better than a human who believes in none. With their ignorance come questions, and one I get asked over and over. Knowledge. Where is the God of knowledge? It is he that I want, they say. It is his domain I worship. It is enlightenment and seek. It is surely in his hold. And always I give them the same answer. Sardior of the iridescent pantheon. That is who you seek. He is lord of psionics and holder of magic. He wields insight in his breath and wisdom in his tongue. And to some that is enough. They begin collecting tomes and scrolls and other curiosities until the amethyst god notices them and takes them into his kin. But to others the prospect of weaponizing knowledge is the very antithesis of their faith. They wish not to become dragon folk crested in gems of violet. They wish not to assault the minds of others. They simply wish to know. Oh, how much I learn from ignorant fools. They are right. Sardior is not the one they seek. There must be another. And indeed, after years of searching, I have come across a figure in the darkest margins of our world. Not in tomes he's mentioned, but in stories living. I first heard of him in the mouths of orcs. They speak of one in the divine walls, who enshrouded in the cover of night, would shamble across the battlefields. Cultists following behind that mass of heads and eyes they call the god. His followers, ones who the orcs call Iliochi, the ones who flayed, would scavenge the ruins of the god's wars in search of ultimate knowledge. They took scrolls and flags and weapons from the field and gave them to the god. They took the few survivors and tortured them in their dens until they revealed their deepest secrets, and if they didn't, the Iliochi would carve out their brains and give them to their god. He who they worshipped could peer into rotting minds and see into the souls of the dead. The Iliochi and their leader were driven to madness throughout the centuries of war, in seeking answers to every god and their followers and their beliefs and their plans and their magic. I'm told the Iliochi who in their mad delusion believed their god stole the brains they hunted, abandoned him and left him alone as the continent split. The Iliochi god refused to forge a pantheon with the other gods, and so stayed in the continent of Andretha, where these so-called pagan gods now lived. The gods' madness deepened as these struggling civilizations became more secretive to guard their existence. He chased and fought alone, seeking what he always sought, knowledge and an answer to every question and every mystery he could conjure. As the civilized races, those whose patrons are the very pantheons the Iliochi god refused to join, made their way across the yawning sea and walked on Andretha, they encountered the mad god. Chief among these races were the orcs, devoted to the elemental pantheon, who above all else fear the awe of the land. The mad god's existence frightened them, and the coming of the new civilization only served to feed the hungry madness in the god. The orcs prayed for the gods to end the foe, and their gods answered. For they're aware of the elemental gods, and four vowed to stand against the emancipated god of knowledge. Largely forbidden from walking on the earth as they once did, the gods targeted the heart of the mad god, his realm. Like all gods, the majority of his form hung suspended in the void as a star, and only a fragment of it is sent down as his avatar. As a passing storm, the four gods annihilated the realm of the Iliachi, and from their tribes on Andretha the orcs saw his energy scatter across the night sky in beautiful waves of vibrant destruction. But still his avatar remained, a small shroud of his power as a god, yes, but part of him nonetheless, now the only part left of his once mighty form. And so the elemental gods struck a deal with another, one willing to break the rules they agreed upon and walk the earth with vengeance. Maglubiet was his name, and his kin were the bugbears, and his domain was death and decay. Hatred he bore for any living thing, his own followers included, and love he had for violence and gore in plenty. He sent to Andretha an avatar of himself, one bestial and savage, with a mane of thorns and carrion upon his shoulders. He strode in yellow fur towards the cowering patron of the Iliachi, an axe of iron and bone dragging along the earth behind him. With a single strike, Maglubiet cut off the head of the god, but one as devoted to violence and death as he, that was unsatisfactory. He tore the god's body into pieces and gave them to his bugbears to feast on. Then he peeled the skin off his head and ate it himself, feeding the god's bones to the bugbear's wargs. Only his brain remained, pulsating before the god and his camp of warlords. Blue and purple it swirled and oozed, gibbering in tongues of nothing. Maglubiet took the wretched thing and cast it into the yawning sea, so the krakens and aboleths in the deepest waters would feast on eldritch brain. It is here that my sources differ. Of the chieftains I've spoken to, 3 main versions I've heard. The first, told to me by Chiefess Kumunku of the Blue Orcs, holds that the aboleths had developed memories that last through the generations, and this attracted the god's brain as it drifted downwards, and with access to the aboleth's memories, the god found his way out of the sea. The second, recounted to me by Chief Isi of the Grey Orcs, goes as such. The aboleths were primal creatures by the time the brain came upon them, and they were ready to feast on it. But instead the god offered them intelligence, memory, and knowledge for the hunts, and so he gave the sea creatures the signature trait, and they carried him out of the yawning sea. The last, which I found most common in the company of green orcs, and particularly Chief Baras, says simply that the aboleths and the god had shared goals of knowledge-seeking, and both recognized the other, and thus they united, giving the brain passage back to Andretha. Regardless of the version, the god spent years with the aboleths, and ultimately returned to Andretha, his wisdom grown and madness quelled. In preparation for his arrival, the god influenced the minds of the people near the sea, assaulting them with visions of his knowledge and might, and turning many into his followers. The orc stories tell that he rose again in a thick green land, but orcs differ on where they interpret that to be. Personally, I find the most compelling case can be made for the marshes, those desolate lands of thick muddy water and putrid green air, where trolls and demons linger. His new followers, which I have dubbed Illithids to distinguish them from the Iliachi, preserved his brain and carried it with them as they escaped into the vast caves below Andretha, where they would make their homes. Due to his form, the god took on the moniker of Elder Brain, and the Illithids worked hard to hide his true name. Now, the Elder Brain doesn't accept any human into his Illithid race, but requires that his would-be followers prove themselves in occult rituals, the last of which supposedly involves inserting a tadpole into the human skull, whereupon it rises in the man's brain. Still, the Illithids seek knowledge. They wish to uncover the mysteries of the world, yet they recognize the value of mystery in regards to their own culture. Races that come across them are often hostile, but the illithids are powerful, and the ones they capture they convert into the race, willingly or not. As thorough as the illithids worked, I believe I have found the god's name, and it is Thoon, Lord of Brains. I am a missionary, devoted to spreading religions to the unfaithful humans, in hopes they worship one god or another. I held that a human who believes in an evil god is better than a human who believes in none. But as I wander through the dark caves of the illithids, I find my mantra is incorrect. Better is a godless human than a cultist of Thoon.